Hey everyone, I hope that you're all well. I just wanted to say happy summer and to jump on here and talk about the books that I'm reading this summer. So, the first book that I want to talk about is the Zohar. I'm reading the second volume. This is published by, I think, like Stanford University Press, and there's like a whole group actually that's producing this. I think her name is Margot. Is her name Margot Pitzer? No, that's not exactly right. I know it's not. Let me see. Pritzker, Margot Pritzker, and Daniel C. Matt. And actually, there's like a whole academic committee. And if you don't know what the Zohar is, basically, it's a commentary on the Torah, the first five books of the Hebrew Bible. And it's a Kabbalistic, esoteric, metaphorical, symbolic kind of dialogue that these rabbis are having as they like just wander through. Um, they're they're on a journey, and they're just constantly like talking about different passages and verses, and it goes chronologically. And I really love the footnotes in this. I think that it's so interesting to learn about the Sephiro and how it seems as if there are the Sephiro that are above Shekinah, Shekinah, the divine principle, the divine feminine principle, that is sort of the gateway or the portal to the rest of them. But then there's also maybe a mirrored set of Sephiro that are the shadow versions of the ones above. For instance, one of the Sephiro is power. And so I think we can all see how we're probably most familiar with corruptions of power and how and power in its shadow side, but there is like an enlightened divine like higher version of power. And same thing with love and beauty. They have their light versions and then their shadow versions. So being symbolic, and Carl Jung is also mentioned like in the footnotes. And so the translator and the committee, like they find connections between, what is said in here and like Plato's Symposium. And there's just a very interesting, like philosophical and psychological sort of underpinning of the translation and then commentary that I just find myself being in alignment with. So I think that I will keep purchasing these volumes. So I don't read it every day, but yeah, sometimes it's a part of my like morning devotional when I do morning devotionals. So I'm continuing with reading Richard Rudd's Gene Keys Systems. So now I'm reading the 64 Ways, which is just his like personal commentaries on the 64 archetypes. If you don't know what this system is, it's basically based on the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, and then also has something to do with human design, I think, or Richard Rudd like came from that system. I don't really know anything about human design, but probably if you do, you might find some influences here. And basically, his kind of cosmology or idea is that there are 64 archetypes that we sort of work through in terms of each archetype's shadow, gift, and siddhi. And we kind of have to go through each of those steps, I guess, to rise in consciousness to each of our potential gifts. And you can go on the website and find out your profile. Everyone has a profile of 11 archetypes that are just most prominent, but we all have all 64, basically. And I really find this to be very inspiring. I love it. Okay, so what else? Okay, so I guess I'll go on to this book, Demeter and Persephone, Lessons from a Myth. The author is Tamara Agha Jafar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she is a professor at a community college in Kansas, and she started a women's studies program. She is, I don't know what generation this is, but I think she was born in like the 1950s. And I mentioned that because this is situated mostly in a women's studies kind of like context, which means that, she uses her rhetoric will include terms like the patriarchy and feminism as kind of as a saving grace. And so it sort of reminded me of my own women's studies program when I was getting my PhD in religion, which I have since sort of departed from or evolved from. Because sometimes it can be very like grievance oriented, but I do see some sort of Jungian influence in this book. So she does talk about how there is the feminine and the masculine within us. She doesn't mention Carl Jung, but I think she's mainly trying to mention like female women authors because she does mention um, what is her Clarissa Pinka Estoles, Women Who Run with the Wolves. So she does mention her, and she's a Jungian analyst and writer and mythologist, but she's like, I don't think she mentions like Joseph Campbell. But she does talk about like how there needs to be a balance and how there are more evolved versions of femininity and masculinity than have been in our history. And she does try to see like I think, redeeming qualities of the male figures in this myth. So I don't know. I sort of went back and forth between really appreciating it and sort of thinking if I knew what the sort of lens would have been before I read it, I might not have chosen it. But in the end, I'm glad that I'm reading it because I think it has a lot of interesting kind of ideas about the myth. So, and I'm teaching world mythology again in the fall. So I'm just like reading new books on different myths and trying to think about different myths that I can assign my students and talk about. So along those lines, maybe is Carl Jung's The Red Book. So I'm about halfway through this, I think. Um, this is Carl Jung's personal um, sort of experimental journey through his own unconscious. And it's mainly about active imaginations that he's done. And I think that most of it was finished, or all of it was finished before World War One. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but he continued to edit it and work on it, etc., throughout his life. And he was very hesitant to have this published and come before the public because he didn't want it to compromise his more like scientific works and I guess personality interaction. And it's also just very personal. Like it's very psychologically deep. Like you will feel as if you were going through your own sort of journey through your unconscious in the underworld when you read this. I think yeah, it's just I don't know. I feel like I haven't really explained it yet. I might do some like actual videos and readings on some passages, but yeah, I don't know. It's it's really a good book. I would recommend it. And let's see. Oh, along that, I guess path is I'm also reading the Freud Jung letters. So Freud and Jung, probably most of you know, had a bit of a journey together. I think it lasted, not more than 7 years. And it's really interesting to see their correspondence, to see sort of the father-son connection that they had. And from my perspective, seeing Carl Jung kind of tread lightly, not wanting to offend Freud's ego, but also having like true, sincere love and admiration for him as well. But you can tell that there's kind of a tendency from both of them, I think, to want to be enmeshed and be sort of on the same team. It's like us against the world, which feels sort of toxic to me. And, Freud seems to be constantly preoccupied how much Carl Jung is agreeing with him. And Carl Jung will kind of say, oh, this is, my different perspective, but it's probably just because I don't completely understand yours. Sometimes he says that, and it's like, oh, that's such a sweet humility and fear, I think. So I'm really enjoying this. Also, I guess, in that there's a theme here. I'm reading A Most Dangerous Method by John Kerr. This is, it's based on John Kerr's dissertation about Sabina Spielrein, who was a patient and a friend of both Jung and Freud, and a lover of Carl Jung. However, I don't know exactly the details, but on the continuum of being friends and lovers. But I think a pretty legitimate lover. I don't know. There's a movie apparently about this with Keira Knightley, I think is that her name. Um, yeah, I don't think I'm going to watch the movie, but I'm definitely loving this because it goes through. Actually, I haven't gotten to the part about Sabina too much yet, which Sabina Spielrein is not just a friend and a patient and a lover. She's like a doctor and a psychoanalyst as well. It seems like she had a hard time really financially supporting herself through that career, but she wrote and published papers and she taught and she had her own clients. And it's really interesting, because in the like late 19th century, I think that some universities were just opening up sort of their degree programs to women. I think all throughout history, women had the ability to be educated and to pursue their intellectual pursuits. I mean, you think about in the Middle Ages, like all of the monasteries, like Sir Juana Inez de la Cruz, who, that was her thing. She had a huge library of thousands of books, and she was well read in all kinds of different avenues and fields of study. And so women, would be tutored by their fathers and read the libraries in their homes. And sometimes women would get special kind of permission to be a student at a university, and read at the university libraries, etc. Maybe because of who their family was, it would be like allowed by the king of wherever they lived. So, but it's fairly recent, actually, that women in general were just allowed to matriculate into the universities and to get degrees and become, to have careers that are paid and published and things like that. So it's really interesting to see the first groups of women who were, interested in that. And it seems like as soon as the universities opened, like women were just really excited. There's actually a really cool picture in the Freud Jung letters. Let's see if I can show this. probably can't see it too much, but you see like a row of women like at the bottom right there. So you see Freud is kind of in the middle, and then Jung is kind of crouching down with his glasses and his bow tie, and his wife is seated in front of him. And there's also Lou Andreas Salome and Antonio Wolff in the picture. So it's really fascinating. Sabina is not in the picture. This was, I think, like the second Congress in 1911. So that's great. I actually have another version of this book, so I could take the picture out and put it on my wall. So I have two copies of this book. So it kind of worked out. But this is really interesting, and I would recommend it because the author goes through the history of hysteria. And it's so interesting that there was a very particular time um, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, yeah, of neuroses, of hysteric, obsessional, interesting neuroses that different from the mental illness that I think we would see today. Um, and so this talks about like the beginning of psychiatry and modern psychology and how like who were the major players in there. And actually, there was a really interesting statement, I think, in this book, although it might have also, or instead, have been in the introduction to the letters, that it was really Jung, even though he was like 19 years younger than Freud, who put Freud more on the map and kind of helped him become sort of the famous person that he is today. And I thought that was really interesting because Jung, I guess, was a part of like a more established kind of hospital and clinic. And yeah, so I don't know. I just think that that's really interesting. I'm very much enjoying it. Okay, so now for philosophy. I am forever trying to finish Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I think I've been reading this off and on for maybe 3 years. I really love it. It's just very dense. And when I am teaching in the fall and spring, I'm reading what I'm assigning to my students and preparing for lectures. So I can't just, read a particular philosopher like all year as I would probably enjoy and want to. Maybe if I were teaching, at a university that had classes that were focused on various philosophers, but I teach at a community college, and so there's intro to philosophy, and we kind of have to not specialize on any one particular person. Um, but I think I have about 200 pages of this left. It's not very long, but I also like to read it slowly because, a lot of times I'll just read 10 pages at a time because I'm annotating and highlighting and thinking about what he's saying. And, he's constantly going through his dialectic. Like the whole thing is going through his dialectic and talking about how consciousness is evolving, how reason is evolving, how spirit is evolving. And, and then he has his little caveats about, how science is sometimes reductive, etc. And so yeah, so I am actually just starting Spirit, this part. And also, what I didn't know in the beginning, but I want to point out, is that in the back of this book, there is a very quick, like 50-page kind of aphoristic summary of the entire book. So I've read that actually, and I thought that that was really helpful. So you might even want to read that first. And I'm also working on finishing Sartre's Being and Nothingness. I am on the section of the body, about around page 453. I'm really loving this. I find that some parts of being in nothingness are really accessible and, can be given to intro to philosophy students. And then there are some parts that, are just as tricky as Hegel, I think, in my opinion. So yeah, so I'm really loving this. I don't know if I'm going to finish either of those books this summer. It just depends because sometimes you see how many books I'm reading at one time. So sometimes I don't get to like all nine or 10 every day. And then the last-ish book, I say last-ish because when I order new books, I'm always just kind of starting them. But I'm reading the brothers Karamazov. So I finished Crime and Punishment last year during, or maybe it was this year. It's actually this year, like during winter break, I think in like January. So I loved that. Crime and Punishment was really interesting because of its exploration of guilt. I feel like one of the things that I got out of Crime and Punishment was that, you know, sometimes we want to seek punishment because the thing is that when we do something that we are ashamed of or we feel guilty for, his Raskolnikov, murdered someone. So, and he was racked with guilt. So even though he was escaping punishment and he maybe could have gotten away, for the purposes of his soul, he wanted almost to like turn himself in. I wonder if he did. I think he kind of like, if he didn't completely turn himself in, he like prompted, that to happen. And it's like because crime is and harming is relational, is social, it also has to be redeemed and sort of, um, yeah, in society. And so I thought it was a really interesting psychological profile. And then Brothers Karamazov is mainly about Alyosha. Is that how you pronounce his name? I don't know. That's how I pronounce his name. This youngest brother of three three brothers. He has two older brothers, and sort of a sensualist, charismatic, buffoon-ish father. And Alyosha is sensitive and thoughtful, and he basically like is a monk in a monastery, although his elder is dying at the point that I am at, and sending him out into the world. And so he's trying to accept that. And I don't really have a maternal instinct, but I have to say, when I'm reading Dostoevsky, Raskolnikov, and Alyosha, I just like my motherly instinct like appears, and it's like I want to protect them. They just seem so sweet. And, Alyosha, I'm on page 300 something, yeah, 300. He hasn't like murdered anyone yet. So I don't know what Russian literature does to me, but I just want to like invite these people in to be my children and like feed them snacks and take care of them. And so they don't like become criminals. I don't know what it is. That's what I feel. Dostoevsky does. But anyway, I would very much recommend this book. I think Dostoevsky is amazing. I mean, he is a literary genius. And the way he writes characters, the characters in this book are just so dramatic and so intense and flamboyant. And it's really a chaotic world that Alyosha is wandering through. So yeah, that's basically, those are all my books that I'm reading. I don't think they can all be stacked up here. Unless, there you go. Okay. So yeah, so these are what I'm reading. And it's basically just because I keep buying books and then I can't not, you know, read them. But if you have any suggestions for me, let me know. After I finish this book, I think I'm going to read Emma Jung's book on the animist and and Anima, and then I am pretty much like two-thirds of the way through Carl Jung's Ion. And so I want to read that. I also have some Edinburgh books that I want to read. And yeah, I don't know. So I figure that I can read at least one book that's like less than 200 pages. So I can actually feel like I'm getting through books because the rest of my books are either, really dense or they're like 500 to 800 pages. Anyway, so I know I haven't been on the channel a lot lately, I think since last year. But that was because last semester I taught Intro to Philosophy for the second time on campus. And it's just a really different experience when you're teaching on campus versus when you're teaching online because you have to prepare for lectures basically. And I just was really inspired. I think I'm always really inspired by Michael Sugrue and Arthur Holmes. And I wanted to up my game with lecturing. So I was just reading a lot and preparing and writing notes, and it was so much fun. I wanted really to create a space where my students felt like even if they didn't read what I assigned, they could still come in and learn everything they needed to from my lectures. And I was lucky to not have anyone in the classroom before me, so I would always arrive like an hour early, and I had two, three, four whiteboards, and I would just like write notes all over, and that would be like our mind map that we went through. And it was so much fun. And last semester, I also taught philosophy of religion, which I really, really loved. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I will hopefully be more active on this YouTube channel. I'm also spending a lot of my days language learning. So I learn languages how I read books. I can't just read one book at a time, and I can't just um, learn one language at a time. So I'm very much a beginner in every language, other than my native language. But I'm studying Spanish, which I have been studying off and on since 2015, but still I don't know what level I'm on, but it's a beginner level. But I'm studying Spanish, I'm studying German, I'm studying Italian, and I'm studying French. So it's all really fun. I think probably in a year I'll just be able to introduce myself. But I'm trying kind of to be immersive and listen to music and podcasts. And I'm on the Duolingo app, which I love. There's also the Busu app, but I just don't spend as much time on that one. And then, there's so many great YouTube videos like easy Spanish, easy French, easy German, easy Italian. So I'm watching all of those. And then there's also Dreaming Spanish, which I just discovered, and they have added Dreaming French. And then, yeah, there's a lot of different ones. I think one is called My Spanish Flow, My Daily Spanish. There's German with Anya, who's really good. And just, I don't know. So if you need recommendations for any of those languages, let me know. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. And I thought about going somewhere and traveling this summer, but I just don't know if I can do that because I don't know. I might just stay here because I have enough books to read in a staycation. But I was thinking about Iceland. I've been there before, and I was thinking about just going there for like a month. But when I looked at all of the places to rent, it's just more expensive than my apartment here. So I don't think I could pay for my apartment here and then also pay for an apartment somewhere else. Um, so I just don't know. And when I travel, I can't just go for like 3 days. I have to go for like at least a month because then otherwise it feels like flying is just not worth it for me. Like an 8-hour flight there and back, and you always have to have like 3 days adjusting to jet lag wherever you're going. So, yeah, I need to basically like if I take a vacation, I have to live there for a while, like go grocery shopping. And I've done two trips to Europe, but I haven't traveled since before the pandemic. And yeah, I also, I'm still kind of healing from anxiety and the agoraphobia that I picked up during the pandemic. So I don't know, like part of me feels like I just need to throw myself into traveling and then I would just be instantly healed. But then also, it's just so expensive. So I don't know. I'll probably end up not going anywhere. And also, I applied this summer to the philosophy department. There's a full-time position. Right now, I'm just an adjunct in philosophy. So I haven't heard back from them yet. So I don't think that's a good sign. But anyway, if you want to send positive vibes to me, you just never know. Okay, all right. I will see you all later. Drop in the comments below what you're doing this summer, what you're reading, if you have read any of these books that I'm reading, and if you're also studying languages or traveling. I'll live vicariously through you.